Alrighty, what's going on, my people? I got a bunch to talk about today, so I'm going to dive right in right now. So the first thing on the top of my list, which wasn't actually my first thing, I kind of came back to that and put it up there, is, what did I say? Is that people can be disciplined in different ways. So I think the reason I wrote that down was because I was thinking about how the way that I go about being disciplined is usually through like working out and eating clean food. Those are the main two things that I use as a mechanism to practice discipline are those two things. And so I guess what I was thinking was that when I see people not doing that, I think, oh, they're not disciplined people. They must not be very disciplined, right? And I was just thinking about today that might not necessarily be true. They might not be disciplined with eating healthy food or working out, but that might just mean that they have different priorities than I do, right? So just because they aren't eating the same things that I am, or just because they don't have the same workout regimen that I do, doesn't necessarily mean that they aren't disciplined people, right? I think that I might have been too critical in the past for thinking that just because they aren't doing what I'm doing changes the fact that they actually are disciplined. Maybe it's still a possibility. I mean, it just depends on kind of where their priorities are and what priorities they have, you know. And I guess I was just thinking about that today because that might have been relatively unfair of me to judge them in that way, because in others' eyes, I'm probably not the most disciplined person either in certain ways. And again, I think that just kind of comes down to where your priorities are and what you care about and what matters to you, right? So I guess discipline falls on a spectrum of different things, but I think that I might have been potentially unfair to people and what's that word? Well, we'll leave it at that. Unfair to people. Okay, next thing on the list. I have people are just wrong a lot of the time. Then I have 17, also from the song, so what, we get drunk, so what, we smoke weed, that's how it's supposed to be, living young. Oh, young, wild, and free, that's what that song's called. I have, so some of the lyrics in that song were, this is kind of a weird story, I guess, but I remember I heard Snoop Dogg say in that song, he raps about, so like I'm 17 again, peach fuzz on my face. And it was just those lyrics right there. It was just 17 again, peach fuzz on my face. And I think that I had seen like an iFunny picture or a meme on this or something like that. And one of the comments was just saying, they were like criticizing how, or I guess just mentioning or stating that when you're 17, you probably won't have peach fuzz. You're gonna have like thicker, more like copper wire, kind of scruffier beards by then. By 17, I remember seeing that and being like, oh, well, that must be how it's supposed to go then. That must be the right way. That must be like the more normal progression of beards. And and then I realized that, like, I just thought about this today, how it's pretty random, I guess, but just how kind of naive I was to where, like, the first thing that I heard or saw was that when you're 17, you're probably going to have more than just peach fuzz by that point. And I just kind of took his word, some total stranger who had no credibility, I had no idea who this was, I just kind of took his word and inherited it as correct and said, yep, that must be the right way. Must be all 17-year-olds have thicker, scruffier beards than just peach fuzz. It's more than just peach fuzz. And I was just thinking about how naive that was, and also how people are just wrong a lot of the time, and how I have learned, I think, to not take people's words so much, or at least take them to heart so intensely, maybe, because a lot of times people have no idea what they're talking about and they just want to be heard. That's it. And so I think that might have been that teenager, he was probably like 13 years old or something, who mentioned that, who commented that, the peach fuzz thing. He probably had no idea. He just felt like he wanted to, maybe he felt insecure about him not having facial hair, or having like a lack of facial hair, or something. And because of that, he wanted to, I don't know, I guess compensate for that. I guess the main point with all that is just to take people's words with a grain of salt, and to kind of do your own research and do your own work, and kind of figure things out on your own, and use people as references, as maybe some guidance, but don't maybe, I would say probably certainly don't take what they're saying for absolute truth, because a lot of the times that's just not the case. I mean, I'd say probably even rarely. I mean, even experts can be wrong. I mean, it's just people are very imperfect systems and machines that, well, they're not machines. I guess is kind of the point. Is that we're in fact very unlike machines. We can't do things perfectly by any means at all, and we make tons of mistakes all the time. And so I guess I've just learned from that a little bit, and certainly there have been many other stories besides that, but that was just one that I very randomly thought of. Is that just because one guy says that you should have more than peach fuzz at 17 doesn't mean that's necessarily true. In fact, it probably has no relevance to fact or truth. So that's that. Okay, next I have, so this is about the news. So one of the guys I work with always talks about what's happening on the news, and the things that are, all the crazy things happening in the US and Colorado and the news. Whatever the news has to talk about, he relays to me usually. And I guess I was just thinking about, I forget who it was. I want to say it was Denzel Washington, was talking about the news, and how the news is an interesting thing, because he was just saying that when you watch the news, you're misinformed, and then if you don't watch the news, you're uninformed, right? So it's kind of like a lose-lose situation, right? So if you don't watch the news, you're uninformed, okay, because you're not watching anything that's happening. And if you do watch the news, then you're misinformed, because again, that kind of comes back to that, comes full circle there, to where people aren't perfect, and even the news probably isn't true. I don't know. I mean, I honestly don't know. I think that we all think it's true. It's probably true. I don't know. But again, people are not perfect by any means. And the news, I think the news is just dangerous. That's just my opinion on the news. Is just that you shouldn't watch the news. I mean, when's the last time you saw something positive and uplifting on the news? Ooh, okay. It's all negativity. It just sucks. Like when you watch the news, I think it was Will Smith talks about how people actually seek negativity and seek these kind of tragic, like, bummer lunch things that happen in the world. Like, I don't even really want to know that some school got bombed on it. Like, I just don't really care to know about that. Not that I necessarily just like don't care about those people, but I just don't like being surrounded with negativity. And I guess that's just the way I view that is, I just don't want to even be in touch with that at all. And so I run from the news, and I try to, I actively try to, I avoid watching the news. And for that reason, because it's just so negative. So that's that. Okay, so I also have, don't let lack of experience prevent you from trying. And I think the reason I wrote this down was because I was listening to a Tommy Caldwell podcast today on Spotify, and he was talking about how he's just basically a normal dude. He's just kind of like an average guy. He's not like built crazy. I guess for those of you who don't know, he's just he's a climber. We'll leave it at that. He's a big climber, very famous, popular climber. And he was just talking about how, like, yeah, he's accomplished these insane, crazy things as a climber, and he's like a huge influencer now, and people know this guy. And he was just mentioning how he's really just like an average guy. Like, there's nothing particularly special about him. And even when he just got into climbing, he really wasn't even that good, he said. He was just some dude who thought it was fun and tried it out. And I guess what I was just thinking about with that is that just because you don't think that you're good at something, or just because you actually aren't good at something because you haven't tried or you haven't really been exposed to it very long, doesn't mean that should necessarily prevent you from working hard and trying to do that thing more consistently and really commit your time to it. Because I just think that people get scared off by the fact that they're not immediately good at something. And that's, of course, you're not immediately good at anything. You're not going to be. The first time you try something, you're gonna suck at it. That's just kind of the way life works, right? I mean, sometimes people have natural talent and they're gifted in certain ways. But even them, their very first time trying anything, you're almost certainly going to suck at it. It's just kind of how it goes. And so I think that if people can, I guess I'll just say if we can prevent that lack of experience and lack of, I guess, courage to jump in and try this thing, then we would probably be doing some pretty cool things. And we'd probably be a lot better at cool things too, if we didn't. Just because you don't have this natural, incredible gift and knack to do something doesn't mean you should just bail and call it there. Because things take work, and you never know what can blossom from your suffering and your dedication to something. You never know what can happen from that, and I think that's worth exploring a little bit. So I kind of need to go work out, and I'm going to do that. So I will see you tomorrow. Roger out.